So, you're sitting down for your session 0. You're getting ready to start a new campaign. Everyone is drafting up their characters. What can you do to make sure that you end up with a good party? Or even the best party? Let's go find out. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka Thrabe, and you here for another Pathfinder Second Edition video. And welcome to Making the Best Party. I've got some goodies today for you. I've got some very nice practical tips and general theory for you. But before we get down to all of that, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for your continued support as I make this really big push to grow this channel and try to make it financially viable for me to continue making this content. So expect to see videos from me every Friday for the remainder of May and June, and then at the end of June, I'm going to reevaluate how much work I am putting into this channel. There are some of you who are supporting me for free by subscribing, and that is very much appreciated. And a handful of people are supporting me financially. So thank you to new YouTube members, Matsurim, Shuzzy, Steven, Sam, Panrozo, Logan, and Philip. You all get early access to all of my videos, including this one. And this video idea is actually funded by Merlanin, who gave me the general concept, which I have refined a little bit, and I think this is going to be a good one. My goal for today is to start out by showing you what it means to build a party and giving you the general overview of good party building tips and strategies and various roles that you're going to want to do. But since there's already a decent number of existing videos on that topic, I'm going to spend most of this video talking about practical ways to improve your party, just giving you 5 really concrete things that you can do to make your party better overall, and then show you through some anecdotes of why this matters so much exactly. So, with that being said, let's get into it. As far as the fundamental of teamwork, it really boils down to math in a lot of cases. In a system like D&D 5e, your goal is to often make the damage number go up as high as possible. And that's not really the case in Pathfinder Second Edition. You are often trying to make your 2-hit chance go up, or your enemy's armor class or saving throw proficiencies go down. And so, if you are trying to build a good party, you should have some ability to increase your relevant bonuses while giving your opponents penalties. And in Pathfinder, there's generally speaking 3 types of bonuses. You can get bonuses from your items, you can get bonuses from your circumstances, and you can get bonuses from status effects. Similarly, you can get penalties to those same things. It's pretty common for you to be able to give a circumstance penalty or a status penalty. It's pretty rare that you're going to give an item penalty, so I'm going to leave that off my list here. So if you have really good teamwork, it might be possible for you to impact all 5 of these things at the same time and massively swing the math of combat. So here's an example that could be easily done at low levels. You have a bard casting a courageous anthem, giving everyone a +1 status bonus to their attack rolls. You give someone the aid action. You get a critical success, so you give them a +2 circumstance bonus to that attack roll. You've got a potency rune on your item. Maybe you actually have that rune, or maybe you're just getting its effect from something like magic weapon / runic weapon. And so you have a +1 item bonus to attack roll. Someone cast a fear spell or otherwise frightened the enemy, giving them a -2 status penalty to AC because they're frightened too. And then you tripped them to make them prone, and hence off guard, so they have a -2 circumstance penalty to AC. And so that can be swinging the math of an attack roll by 8. Something we say in the Pathfinder community very frequently is that every +1 matters. The circumstances here are not all that difficult to achieve. And let's say you did slightly worse on it. You only succeeded on your aid action. It's a +1. You got frightened 1 because the enemy saved instead of frightened 2. Cool, you're still swinging the math by 6. Like, this is such a massive, such an incredible, meaningful change to the math of combat. And this is the sort of stuff that you can do to take down tough enemies. The ones that are realistically going to give your party some trouble. You don't need to do all of this stuff, or the little rat that your barbarian is going to hit with their D12 plus 4 weapon and just obliterate in a single strike. But when you need it to, this is the sort of thing that your party should be capable of doing. And if you're building a party, I recommend that you make yourself a little bingo card. Maybe it looks something like this. I want you to think about what you can do in combat to hurt the enemies. I want you to think about what you can do in combat to have utility and do things other than just raw damage. And I want you to think about what can you do outside of combat as well. And a good party should be able to cover most of the things on this chart. Note that all damage is not created equal. There is a very big difference conceptually in the damage that you are targeting at one enemy to try to remove them from the map versus the damage that you're sending out at a whole bunch of people looking to do a bunch of damage but spreading it out across multiple characters. Your fireballs and your lightning bolts are very, very different from, say, a spell that is directed at a single enemy, and those are likely to do different types and amounts of damage. In terms of your spellcasters should probably be able to target at least 2 of the 3 saves, and maybe 3 of the 4 possible defenses. That is, armor class, fortitude saves, reflex saves, and will saves. Don't forget about armor class as being something viable to target with a spellcaster, because you can do things like this to really help make spellcaster attack rolls meaningful. There's a great Pathfinder video about spell attack rolls if that is something you are interested in doing a deep dive on, but it's outside of the range and scope of today's video. As far as in-combat stuff goes, it's probably pretty obvious that you need some degree of healing within combat. Maybe it's heal spells, maybe it's soothes, maybe it's battle medicine. You need to be able to do something. The enemies tend to hit harder than you do as PCs, so if you don't have some degree of healing, it can be difficult for you to make it through harder fights. You probably want some ability to buff and debuff so that you can, again, swing that math and make the fight easier for you. But there's stuff beyond just damage and making health go up and down that matters within combat. Fights often get significantly easier if you can recall knowledge and learn what your enemy's lowest saves are, or learn what their weird special reaction or strange ability is. And as you reach higher levels, you're going to have specific problems that you're going to need to solve in combat. What do I do versus the invisible enemy? What do I do versus the flying enemy? What do I do versus the enemy who's immune to precision damage and is really hard for our rogue to effectively attack? These sorts of things are things that you might want to be thinking about. And I'm going to loop back to the specific problem idea later on in the video. And as far as out of combat stuff goes, you should have a way to top off everyone's health in between combat. A kineticist with a Garden of Healing spell. A couple of people with the ability to treat wounds because they are trained in medicine. A kineticist who can give everyone apples and you just eat apples for a while until you're feeling better. Something like that. You should have some ability to interact with the world meaningfully. Stopping traps and hazards can be really useful. Having at least one person with a good diplomacy and maybe intimidation and a few of those other social scores so that you can meaningfully interact with the townsfolk without just everyone being scared of you or not liking you. And you probably want someone who can sneak around, maybe a couple people who are good at gathering information because they're trained in society, that sort of stuff. This little table that I have here isn't exhaustive, but it should give you the sort of idea of what you should be looking to do if you are trying to build a good party. If everyone is coming to the table with the exact same strengths, you're going to find that you end up having some glaring weaknesses, and when you are missing some roles, your life gets a little harder. If you are specifically interested in roles within combat, Swing Ripper has a really good how to build your character to optimize a party video that I highly recommend. I don't intend today to be a general generic theory day, though. I intend today to be specific pointed advice. These are actionable steps that you can take to improve your party. So let's get into that now. And for number 5 here, we're going to start by talking directly to our martial players. I want you to consider your weapons. When I first started building Pathfinder characters, my inclination was to just go for the big D12 weapon die, or go for the largest weapon die that I could get. If I'm doing a one-handed thing, I want to make sure that I have a D8 weapon. And as I've played more and more combats, I've realized that the highest performing martials are not necessarily the ones that always pick the D12 weapon or the highest damage weapon. And because we're talking about party building specifically, I want to highlight 2 traits that you might be seeing on your weapons: fatal and deadly. They work similarly. So, for fatal weapons, on a critical hit, your weapon's damage die increases to that die size instead of the normal die size, and the weapon adds 1 additional damage die of the listed size. So you might have a D10 weapon that is a fatal D12 weapon. So when you get that critical hit, all your D10s are now D12s, and you get an extra D12 on top of that. That's pretty cool. In average circumstances, is your fatal thing the best to use? Maybe not. But if your party is going to be focused on buffing you and supporting you, all of a sudden this starts to sound like a really good deal. If you are only critting on a 20, maybe fatal doesn't sound great. You are critting on a 17 to 20. Now that's an entirely different thing, right? Similarly, if you have the deadly trait, on a critical hit, the weapon adds a weapon damage die of the listed size. You roll this after doubling the weapon's damage. So these are ways to get some extra damage out of your weapons if you are in a well-supported party. Now, I do want to caution you here. I am discussing these traits in a party building video. If you are walking into a random table of players, or a one-shot, a pickup game, a Pathfinder Society game, trying to make the most out of your fatal and deadly weapons won't be the same, and you shouldn't expect them to be. And this is what I conceptually think of as the gunslinger problem. So many of the guns have the fatal or deadly trait, and they are really, really good if you are getting the critical hits that a gunslinger really wants to do. And the gunslinger absolutely fucking slaps when supported well, and is kind of a mediocre character when it's not. If you have someone up there demoralizing for you, if you have a bard giving you a courageous anthem like that gunslinger, it feels so incredibly good. You start mixing in the aid action, and oh yeah, baby, we are ready for some big crits. But if you're not being supported, significantly less good. In general, when you are thinking about selecting your weapon, the things that have higher damage die tend to have fewer traits. So, super simple example here. Here's your Great Axe. This is a D12 weapon. It hits like a truck, and it has the pretty forgettable sweep trait on it. The Earthbreaker is a weapon that I have grown to love. This is a two-handed weapon that normally does bludgeoning damage, but also has versatile piercing. And the versatile trait was something that I slept on for a long time until I started playing against enemies that had very specific properties. The ability to switch your damage type sometimes will let you trigger weaknesses, or more importantly, avoid resistances. And the Earthbreaker has some other things going for it, like raising as well. So this is a classic example of why this matters so much. Here is a Black Pudding, which is an enemy that you might encounter in mid-level adventures. I think this is like a level 7 enemy or something like that. There's a handful of oozes that are going to work similarly. Under immunities here, we are immune to acid, critical hits, mental, piercing, precision, slashing, unconscious, visual, and I think there's a few more beyond that as well. So, if you are walking into this fight with your Great Axe that does just slashing damage, you're going to walk up, you're going to hit that thing, and you are not going to do any damage. It may even be worse than that, depending on what type of ooze you are fighting against. Sometimes when you fight an ooze, if you deal the wrong type of damage to it, it will in fact split in half, doubling its action economy, but halving its health. And that can be a very, very scary thing when you don't know that's coming. Recall knowledge players, you know what's up, right? But when you have these versatile weapons, you can go, okay, I know that my slashing didn't work, I'm going to try bludgeoning. Okay, fantastic, bludgeoning worked, now we know that we can bludgeon this thing to death. And so when you're selecting your weapons, I want you to think about your entire party. Having a variety of weapon types absolutely matters when you run into resistances and unusual enemy types. And honestly, there is nothing wrong with having a backup weapon that does a different type of damage in your bag. Don't feel like you need to deck out that backup weapon with all sorts of crazy runes or anything like that. The difference between I cannot damage this enemy and I can do a small amount of damage to this enemy is a significant difference. Thinking about this in video game form for a second, if you are playing a party in, say, Dawnsbury Days that have multiple strength marshals, if you have them both with the exact same type of weapon, or at least the same damage type, you are going to be good, so very good against the things that you're bad. Sorry, you're going to be good against the things you're good against, and very, very bad against the things you are bad against. I regularly just kind of turbo through the campaign with a whole bunch of parties, just trying to test out different combinations, and every once in a while I'll forget, and I will have a party full of slashing weapons versus oozes, and I'll go, uh-oh, this is a problem. And it was an avoidable problem. Note that when you are thinking about your weapons, you should be thinking about what traits they have, because some weapons give you better access to athletic maneuvers, which you can always do if you have a free hand, and sometimes you get to cheat a little bit because your weapon has one of trip, grab, disarm, or whatever it is that you're looking for, and athletics is going to lead into my next point. So, let's talk reactions. Pathfinder has this 3-action economy, right, where you get to do 3 things on your turn. But in actuality, there's kind of this secret 4th action, your reaction, and you would like to use this as much as possible. And when you are building a party, you should be thinking about what reactions are in that party. And you should try to set your other players up to be able to use their reactions, because they get more out of their turn cycle that way. If you are only ever using 3 actions on your turn and you are not utilizing a reaction, you are only using 3/4 of your possible action economy. And if your entire party, to push it to an extreme, is not using their reactions all, well, you're leaving a lot on the table and you might not be operating as an ideal party. So let's just start with a simple example. You've got 2 fighters, both of them have a reactive strike. And maybe that enemy would just stand there and punch you in the face. Just punch you in the face 3 times every turn. But you can set it up to guarantee your reactions. Fighter number 1 goes and trips, so that the enemy is forced to stand on their turn. Well, now both of the fighters get to use their reaction and do a reactive strike on that enemy, who is either very, very sad or more than likely just dead at this stage. And reactive strike is often going to be one of the simplest things to set up and guarantee that it happens. Sometimes you can help trigger your ally's reactive strike by moving out of the way of an enemy so that they are forced to walk towards your fighter, who maybe has a reach weapon to make their reactive strike more likely to work. I think my favorite way to trigger reactions is with the spell Roaring Applause. So on a failure, the target applauds so vigorously that it A, can't use its own reactions. Well, that's great for your action economy anyway. B is slow. C, the applause gets the manipulate trait, meaning that it is going to trigger reactions based on the manipulate trait at the start of the target's turn. You make them clap so hard, so vigorously, that your marshals get to use their attack of opportunities on them. That is awesome. I adore this spell so much. And in terms of party building and role management, if your spellcasters can handle specific problems, such as enemies that have difficult reactions, you're not only going to solve that problem, you're also going to make your reactive strike allies more potent characters. Both of those examples were pretty simple. Let's go to a medium example here. As spellcasters get to higher and higher levels, it becomes more common that they want to use lower level spell slots on reaction spells. And Shadow Projectile is a great example of that. So the trigger is an ally within 20 feet of you makes a ranged attack roll. And then you get to make a duplicate of your ally's ranged attack to confuse your opponents. There's 3d8 mental damage attached to this based on a will save, but you can also make your ally's attack more potent here by making your enemy flat-footed to the triggering attack. So let's say that you are playing a gunslinger or some class that is using a bow. If you know that your spellcaster has this reaction, you can move within 20 feet of them before you make your strike. And then that allows their reaction to trigger. Whereas if you are just blasting from the very back of the map, you are not going to trigger your ally's reaction. And this is exactly what I mean when I say know what your ally's reactions are, because it sets you up for these cool combos and these teamwork situations that you very easily could just accidentally end up avoiding if you don't communicate with your other teammates. By no stretch of the imagination do you need to know all of the spellcaster's spells or all of the class abilities of every single person at the table, but I think reactions are a big one where you should know what reactions your allies are capable of. Let's round this out with a kineticist example, and this one requires an understanding of some rules here. So the kineticist has a handful of abilities that generate difficult terrain. Winter's Clutch is something that you could have at level 1, where you cover the ground in snow, making it difficult terrain. And I think around level 6, you can pick up Tumbling Lumber, which creates greater difficult terrain in a very large area, 10-foot wide, 30-foot long line. That's like the whole hallway if you are in a hallway, a sort of fight. So how does this set up reactions? Well, the important rules thing is that you can't step into difficult terrain unless you have some special feat that allows you to do that. So, you are not only going to slow down the enemy that is trying to run up to your party, but when they do finally get there, you are going to go and trigger the reactive strikes. You can't step into this difficult terrain, so you're just going to have to walk on up to that fighter, and that fighter is going to bonk you before they get to you. Or sorry, before you get to them. Difficult terrain is something that I think often gets ignored when you are first starting to learn the system, and it ends up being able to do some incredibly warping things once you know what it is capable of. You can waste a lot of enemy actions and trigger a lot of martial reactions if you use the creation of difficult terrain well. Anyway, kineticists are sweet, but I've sung their praises enough, so on we go. Similarly, in terms of working with your party, you should avoid giving enemies reactions whenever possible. And for those of you that play spellcasters, there is no worse feeling than starting your turn next to an enemy that has a reactive strike. And it's worse if they have a reactive strike and reach, because then a step doesn't get you out of it. And so you often end up just having to do something that triggers that reaction, and hopefully you don't go down to the attack. Hopefully you don't get crit on and your action gets disrupted. So if you can do things that stop your enemies from taking reactions, that's really, really good. The Roaring Applause type spells that shut down reactions are fantastic, But you can also just move an enemy. You could be a swashbuckler and use your leading dance and just dance the enemy away from the spellcaster. You could use a spell or an action that can shove or otherwise move an opponent to get them out of the range of their reaction. And I think this is slept on a lot in terms of spell selection. If you are interested in this concept specifically, I believe Pathfinder has an entire video about how Acid Grip is an underrated spell because it can move enemies around the battlefield. So let's move on from reactions now. So this next one is going to be pretty specific, so I'm basically going to avoid talking about generalities in here and just recommend that you try to enable the specific abilities of your other PCs whenever possible. And I will use the Rogue as an example here. The Rogue has the Dread Striker feat, which says that any creature that has the Frightened condition is also off guard against your attacks. So if you know that your rogue ally has this ability, and you can build something into your character that can consistently make people frightened, your rogue is going to be eating good, and the damage output of your party is going to go up. So the Alchemist has a really easy one, for example, the Dread Ampule. So it deals mental damage, and on a hit, the target becomes Frightened 1 or Frightened 2 on a critical hit. And there's tons of other ways you can do this. The Bard's Dirge of Doom is a great example of this. You can just demoralize to frighten people as well, but this can be a way for the rogue to get off guard in parties where you might not have multiple people who just want to be in the mix in melee. Flanking is the easiest way to get off guard in many cases, but this is another great way to do it, and having those options and being able to enable those options makes for stronger parties. For another rogue-related example here, there is a feat called Head Stomp. You make an unarmed melee strike against a prone target. If it hits, until the end of your next turn, the target is Stupefied 1 or Stupefied 2 on a critical hit and off guard as well. So imagine that you know that there is an enemy spellcaster. One of your marshals runs up, trips that spellcaster. The rogue runs up and gives them a good head stomp. Well, now they are stupefied, and they are going to have a harder time casting their spells successfully. And hey, maybe this trip also is going to trigger an attack of opportunity, going back to our previous section as well. Or sorry, rather the stand-up action is going to trigger that attack of opportunity. So you can get a lot of synergy if you start building your party around specific abilities. If you know that one person's job is going to be running up and tripping the enemies very consistently, then you can go and build around that. As a quick side note here, my next video is going to be about a bard specifically who wants to run up and trip people. And so just planting some seeds for future videos. You can also choose to specifically build your entire character around another PC. The Sniping Duo archetype is a great example of that, where you have a ranged class that is very capable of working together with one specific marshal to give each other benefits. This is something that I already covered in another video, my one about Guns and Gears Remastered, so I'm not going to go into it too much today, but this is something that you should look into if you want to really maximize your synergy with one specific player. There are other things that work kind of like this. I believe the Cathartic Mage also has something where you essentially can have an emotional support friend, but I'll leave that to you to research. And in terms of working together and enabling abilities, keep in mind that Pathfinder is a team game. You don't need your damage number to always be the biggest. You can make your allies' damage go up, either by increasing their accuracy or just increasing their damage. And one of my favorite ways to do this is with a Psychic. They have a cantrip called Glimpse Weakness that is really neat. You target a creature within 60 feet, and the first ally that lands hit on the target gets additional precision damage equal to 1 plus this spell's level, and then the spell ends. But when you amp this, the additional precision damage is instead 1d4 plus 1, and then it starts scaling up every couple of spell levels. So one of my favorite things to do as a psychic is just glimpse weakness, glimpse weakness, glimpse weakness on 3 different characters, 3 different enemy characters, and then whenever my allies get around to hitting them, they are going to get a pretty hefty boost to their bonus. While D&D 5e is like, yeah, you ate breakfast today, take an extra d4 of damage on that attack roll. Pathfinder doesn't do that nearly as often. So getting things that you can do as a single action that just increase your allies' damage output is quite strong. As a quick side note and rules note real quick, you raw cannot glimpse weakness the same person multiple times. You can't just look at the boss, go, glimpse you, glimpse you, glimpse you on the same person 3 times in a single turn. That doesn't work due to how duplicate effects work in this system. But if you're playing Dawnsbury Days, you can absolutely do that and stack up a very large number of glimpse weakness abilities on a single person and then just crit them down at once. That is very, very fun, but that is not how the TTRPG experience is actually supposed to work. And for one last example of enabling your allies, the familiar of ongoing misery from the witch is like really strong, kind of absurdly strong, like absolutely a standout ability on the witch, and certainly the best witch subclass. So whenever the witch sustains or casts a hex, your familiar can curse a creature within 15 feet of it, prolonging the duration of any negative status conditions affecting it by 1 round. So your witch doesn't have to be the one that casts that thing that is giving it a negative status condition, right? So you can cast your big scary spell, and then the witch can prolong it. Well, why is this so important? In Pathfinder Second Edition, there are many spells that work roughly like this. If the enemy succeeds, something lasts for 1 round, and if they fail, it lasts for a minute. If your witch can just keep sustaining the negative effect that the opponent did save on, it's as if they did not actually save on that spell. And this is a really, really big deal and can be incredibly warping in combat. So if your witch has this familiar of ongoing misery, build into it and enable them to do their crimes against humanity. It's real good. Real good teamwork there. All right. If that section was all about the specifics and not about the general, this section is all about the general. Anything you can do to take pressure off of HP pools is going to make your party more successful. Your character is probably built to be really, really good at one specific thing, and then they have other things that they are also capable of doing. Your character is going to do well if they get to do the thing that they're good at. And, if people die, they stop doing the thing that they are good at. So if you can play in a way that is most likely to let as many of your party members as possible do their thing, do the thing that their class is good at for as long as possible, your party is going to be good. And usually, the thing that lets PCs do what PCs want to do is making it so that you lose less health, or you otherwise take pressure off of the HP pools in some way. Maybe that's handing out temp HP, for example. Razmir in Priest Archetype, one of the best ways in the game to take pressure off of HP pools. But there's plenty of other ways as well, and we don't necessarily have to focus on the broken ones here. Whenever a character does go down, it is usually 2 entire turns to get that PC back to an operational state. When a PC drops, it's not just 2 actions wasted using a heal spell on them. PC number 2 might move, draw a potion, administer of a potion. PC number 2 might move, cast a 30-foot range heal spell for 2 actions afterwards. And then the first PC that originally went down is going to need to stand and pick up at least 1 item. Many times it will be 2 items. You stand, you pick up your sword, you pick up your shield, you don't even move, you don't even attack that turn. And so going down is just disastrous in terms of action economy. So you want to take the pressure off the HP pools to keep it so that you don't have to be healing people and so that this never happens. Most of the sample combats that I do that I end up losing are because a death spiral starts. And there's a ton, and I mean a ton of ways to play smart or use your spell slots or abilities well to take pressure off of HP pools. The shield block reaction is one that just about anybody could do. Many classes get that as a built-in feat, or you can take shield block as a general feat. You don't have to move in and go attack with your turn. It's just as valid to move in, attack once, and move back. As long as your enemy doesn't have an attack of opportunity, which every single enemy does not have in this system, you can force the enemy to move to you, wasting one of its actions, and that's really strong. That's one chance that they have. That's one less chance that they have to deal lethal damage to you, or damage that would later need to be healed. You can inflict status conditions on your enemies, like dazzled or blinded, that will decrease their effective accuracy. You can accomplish the same thing by using spells such as Mirror Image to make it so that the enemy can't hit you as easily because you have some shadow clone duplicates that are annoying it. You can have an animal companion on the battlefield that just adds another HP pool to the fight that the enemies have to deal with. Or you could even use a summon spell to go and just distract the enemy. That enemy might be able to smack and crit down that summon in a hit or two, but those were attacks that weren't directed at you. This is by no means an exhaustive list. But if many of your players are playing in a way that do just a little something, just a tiny something that increases your survivability, you are going to drastically increase the chance that you make it through every combat, even the tough ones, alive. My final tip here is the one that I think is most important, but it's also the one that is hardest to spell out because it's going to be so unique to every single class and character. But I fully believe that it is important to have an oh shit button. Things are eventually going to go wrong. Maybe you roll poorly. Maybe the enemy rolls well. Maybe you couldn't use recall knowledge successfully to figure out the gimmick fight. And things start to look bad. Maybe your character is forced off of their primary role. Maybe your healer can't heal for one reason or another. Maybe they've been restrained by an enemy and they don't want to risk using their big spell slot when it might fizzle due to a flat check. Maybe the healer is fully down. So I think the most important thing to think about when building a party is what are your oh shit buttons? What are the levers that you can pull when things go wrong and people can't do the roles that they are normally doing? And the more people who can just smack this emergency button and go, don't worry, I've got this, the more successful your party is going to be in those severe and extreme encounters where death is realistically on the table. And if you don't know what this button is going to be for your character, I recommend playing an investigator for a couple of combats. They don't need to be extensive or anything, but just watch what happens when you play an investigator. Because when you play an investigator, you get to devise a stratagem, which, long story short, probably means that you get to know whether or not a strike would be successful on your turn. So the investigator regularly is going to be put in situations where they know their strikes won't work. And strikes are one of the things that investigators are supposed to do as a martial class. So when you play an investigator, you get really good at coming up with creative turns when you just can't strike. And you will probably get better at thinking, oh, what if I took cover behind that rock? I'll go ahead and hide over there. Or you might start thinking about other skill actions that you can be doing when you are forced off of your primary game plans. And I think this is sort of the training wheels for how do I build my emergency button. Like, what do I need to be able to do to save the party when things are terrible? Or what do I need to be able to do if I'm disarmed and I don't have my weapon and I still need to do something offensively? And I think marshals can find themselves in situations where their strikes just aren't effective, either because the enemy has too much AC, or it has high resistances to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. It has a really high hardness value, and you might need to find other things to do in combat other than just attack. Otherwise, it might take you forever to end the encounter. And in building these oh shit buttons, you can build them at different levels of commitment. So let's imagine the very simple scenario where the primary healer goes down. A low commitment option is, I have a potion in my bag. A slightly more committal option is, hey, I bought healer's gloves. That gives me a little heal once per day. More committal than that is, I used one of my skill feats to pick up battle medicine, so I can boop someone and get them back up or keep them from going down. Even more committal than that is, I took a medic archetype to make my battle medicine even better. Even more committal than that is, okay, now I went down the entire medicine tree and I took everything that I could to make my battle medicine better. Your oh shit buttons don't necessarily have to be, okay, I built half of my character around hedging for this exact scenario, but in thinking about what your backup plans are, just know that sometimes your backup plan is, I'm drawing a different item from my bag, or I'm stowing my weapon, I'm picking up another one. And this is where you might be looking to items with activated abilities, innate spells from your ancestry feats that maybe give you 2 action activities, such as the Minotaur's raise slabs, archetype feats that will just give you something else to do. One of my favorites from these was something that came up in a session a week or two ago, where our fighter just cast Wall of Stone. None of us really knew that this was coming. The fighter was just in a scenario where they were trying to protect some people. They didn't just want to run up and just do the normal thing that they were doing of attacking. We were afraid of casualties. So they just cast a wall of stone and they blocked off half of this church that we were in. And in 3 actions, saved, 20 to 50 townsfolk, however many people were actually in there. And that was one of the best examples of an oh shit button that I have ever seen. They picked up Wall of Stone by taking the Cavern's Heart rune, which they slapped onto their armor. Now, is there some downside to this specific Wall of Stone? Yeah, its life force is kind of tied to your own life force. But did our enemy know that? No. No, they did not. And so this wall got thrown up. The enemy was like, oh, whatever, okay, I guess I'm not attacking those people anymore. And they focused on the party. Fighter absolutely instantly got a hero point for that action. That was just super, super cool. And now this is something that our fighter just has in their pocket. If they are facing off against an enemy that has just ridiculous hardness or resistances, they can just put that thing in a box for a little while and go, all right, you go in that box for a little while. Sure, you can still go and hit the wall. I'll take some damage meanwhile, but we can try to deal with the rest of the fight and then figure out a plan for you in a minute. And I'm currently playing a Necromancer. One of my favorite oh shit buttons is the spell Muscle Barrier, a focus spell that can dish out just an insane amount of temporary hit points. I think it's up to 60 or 70 hit points, temporary hit points at this stage. And that's something that I could theoretically do up to 4 times per battle, which is just wild. Is that something that I want to do? No, I would rather be trying to end the fight. I would love to be using my Bone Spears with a Sure Strike to just deal out disgusting amounts of damage. I would rather be throwing my Synesthesias onto my boss-type enemies to really hamper their ability to do, well, anything. But when someone takes 50, 70, 100 damage in a turn, and I just need to keep them up, Muscle Barrier is one of the best tools in my toolkit to do that. And with focus spells specifically, you can cast any of the focus spells that you know with those focus points. So learning a focus spell that is your oh shit, like things are going poorly, this fight is tough, I need to switch my strategies, being able to do that sort of thing is really good. And again, the more of your party members that have this flexibility and this emergency button that they can whack to get themselves out of difficult spots, the less of a chance you have of being TPK'd by something that catches you off guard or by some bad luck. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and wrap this video up. Outside of the generic stuff that I talked about at the beginning of the video, these were my 5 main points. Consider adjusting your weapons so that you are covering multiple different damage types and utilizing the weapon traits that you need to be successful. Enable the reactions of your allies, preferably while also keeping your enemies from taking reactions. Enable the specific abilities of each one of the PCs. Do something to take pressure off of the HP pools so you don't have to spend as much time healing or getting up from being downed. And have an emergency button that you can press for when things go wrong. I hope this all has been useful for you. If you have other tips, feel free to throw them in the comments, and come back next Friday where we are going to be talking about a warrior bard, and I'm going to attempt to make the most annoying bard possible for that. All right, have a great rest of the day, folks. And if you made it this far in the video and you're not already subscribed, just saying, that's a great way to support me. See ya.